Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Kunsang Payo Choling tonight. And we're happy to present to you another teaching by Jetsunma, Ahkon Lhamo. And tonight is part 5 of the teaching on the transfer of consciousness at the time of death. In part 5, this is where you've already died, you're in the bardo, and the Wrathful Deities begin to appear. So, hope you stay with us and enjoy it and learn a lot from it, as do we.
First of all, good afternoon. I'm glad that you're here. I would like to mention, I would like to give you a reminder so that you can have a little bit better perspective. First of all, try to remember that now you are not yogis yet. You are in training. And in training means that you don't have all the answers. In training means that you are not expected to have all the answers. In training means that all the answers haven't been given to you yet, so you can't possibly have all the answers. I'm sensing, both from the report that I had about the practice sessions that you had without me yesterday, and also from these questions, that you're not thinking that way. You're not having a sense of perspective. You need to realize that you are in training, and that during the course of this week, probably many of your questions will be answered, and that there will be time for you to ask them. But give it time to unfold. I haven't taught on the subjects that you're asking questions about yet. So give it time to unfold naturally. There are many ways that we can do this retreat. We can take a month to do it, and we can have a whole week of intensive training, meaning that you would not practice at all, but simply all your questions would be answered, every single one down to the most minute detail, and the rest of the time we could do nothing but practice. That certainly is one method to do it, to do this retreat in, but I'm not sure that it's the best method. I'm not sure that it's the most efficient. Many less participants would be able to come if it were a month-long retreat. They would not come as frequently. They would not have the opportunity to practice during the first part of the week, and they may not finish the retreat. It seems to work out better if during the context of a week we mix both teaching and practice. And that, of course, implies that you're going to begin to practice without all of the teaching. Well, that's just how it goes. You needn't worry about that. What's most important is that you begin and work with the assumptions that you know, work with what you do know, and result begins simply through intention, even if you don't have every visualization down perfectly. And in fact, it doesn't matter if you don't have every visualization down perfectly in one way, because there are very few practitioners who are capable and able enough to be able to get down every single visualization in detail at any rate. So literally, you could have the information about every single detail, and there are some texts that even indicate the way that the deity's robe is folded. Every single ripple, every single fold in the deity's robe. And that is considered thorough teaching. But for Westerners who have had no training in visualization, and that means training from a very young age, it's pretty much useless. That sort of thing is useless. We rely mostly on the Vajrayana point of view concerning devotion and concerning correct view, concerning bodhicitta, concerning pure intention. These are the things that we rely on. But most of all, first and foremost, we must rely on our spiritual guide. And in order to do that, you have to dump the kind of pride that says you have the right to sit there and demand answers while you're waiting to practice. So in the meantime, rely on your spiritual guide. Develop a sense of spaciousness and peacefulness and good manners in your mind. And wait. You see? You have to wait. You have to wait, all in good time. You will be given, if you have come to trust your spiritual mentor, you know that you will be given everything that you need. And then it's up to you to discover that it is what you need. And then it's up to you to discover that you must use it. But that sense of trust is of the utmost importance. If you do not learn that sense of trust now, you will not have the opportunity at the time of your death, when you do meet with Amitabha, should you have that opportunity to recognize. That sense of trust is necessary. That sense of trust is not inborn unless you have practiced like this before. Since many of you have not practiced in this way or have not successfully completed practice in this way, that level of trust has to be built now. That means that you rely on your spiritual mentor much more than you rely on your own ego. And so that process has to be begun now. There will not be time at the moment of your death. Furthermore, I would like to explain one question that I think is necessary to clear up at this point, because if it isn't cleared up, you will assume that you know more than your spiritual mentor, and you will assume that you know how things will go at the time of your death, and you will not follow through with your practice. The question that many people have, and this is what needs to be answered, is that they sort of look at their books and they think, well, here's a pretty thick book, and here's a kind of a thin book. I have no idea whether at the time of my death I will have time to open my practice. Well, you're right. You don't have any idea whether at the time of your death you will have time to open your practice. Now, do you really think that that wasn't thought of? I mean, come on, guys. Lighten up. Remedial Dharma 101. This has been thought of, really. Lots of people have died. We've pretty much got it down. So worry not. Now here's what actually has to happen. This book and this book are not for the time of your death. They are for now. They must be practiced now. There's a really good chance that at the time of your death you will not be able to pick the books up in time. And you may drop them. You may not have enough breath to finish. Really, this has all been thought of. Don't worry. These books are for now. The signs that you must see in order to know that you are prepared for death have to happen now. They don't happen before you die. They will not happen before you die. You will not have time at the moment of death to prepare for your death. That isn't going to happen. So the signs that have to happen now, they must be received at this time. We want them now. This book, this preparation, this mundro, which helps us to gather merit and helps us to purify karma and helps us to make it possible for our minds to have the kind of quality to be able to hold, like a good bowl without a crack, such a practice. This is for now. This is now when you have to do this. The winds have to be purified now. The channels have to be unkinked now. Your mind has to be stabilized now. You have to learn not to be such whiners now. You have to learn to renounce cyclic existence now. You won't have time at the time of death. You'll have time for maybe a quick thought. If you've already practiced renouncing cyclic existence at the moment of death, you will have time to simply give all of that to the three precious jewels. That you will have time for. That kind of inclination, that kind of giving, you will still, even after the elements dissolve, have the wherewithal to practice. But of course you will not have time to practice every aspect of the visualization and the prayers. I mean, do you think that, forgive my language, but I have to scold you a little bit. Do you think that the Buddha Dharma was written by enlightened beings that were so anal, that they said, well, you know, if you do every one of these prayers, especially the ones that I've written, then we'll let you in. But if not, what are you thinking? You know it's not like that. It can't be like that. That would neither be logical, nor realistic, nor sensible. what superficial view of reality do we have if we hold such bizarre and crazy ideas? What we are doing now is to prepare ourselves through gathering merit, through accumulating virtue, through purifying our inner winds, channels, and fluids, through understanding what bardo is, through studying and contemplating the nature of cyclic existence, including the bardo, through having preparation as to how the bardo experience will actually take place, through developing devotion. All of these things have to happen now. If you're waiting till, a week before you drop dead, what is that? And second of all, what's a week? Even if you have that much time, you don't have enough time during the course of a week or month or even a year. Preparation starts now, and you do what you can as quickly as you can with as much devotion as you have now. And so that's what has to happen. At the time of one's death, if you are fortunate enough to where you have spent a long time dying, and you have been in the bardo of the condition of your death, which means that the cause of your death is already within your body and is active in your body. So you've known for a long time that you're going to die, and let's say that you have the good fortune where a physician, this would have to be a heck of a physician, wouldn't it, would come into your room and say, well, looks like 4 o'clock today. That's what I say, 4 o'clock, you're on your way out. Toes up, kid, 4 o'clock. And let's say, everything is perfect, and somewhere around 2:30 you still have your mental faculties complete, so you pick up your book and you think, I think I'll open my practice. This could happen. I mean, it could happen, but really, what is the likelihood? I mean, there is no likelihood that that's going to happen. The rarity of such a situation is ridiculous. Plus the fact that when people are getting ready to die, they're not at their best condition. They're not necessarily right with the program. They're not necessarily... there are some people that remain alert right until they cross that threshold. Lucky them. But it is not the case. So don't you think that since this poa was authored and given to us by those who have achieved enlightenment, who have practiced poa successfully, would have taken into consideration that this poa is written for you, for sentient beings. It is written for sentient beings who have not solved their problems yet, haven't got renunciation down, haven't got anything down yet. In fact, this kind of poa is kind of last hoperville. It's really designed for those who could not practice generation and completion stage practices excellently. Those kinds of practitioners who can practice those practices excellently probably will not need the poa. So you must understand that this is not only possible, it is not only accomplishable, doable, but it is also necessary, and it is necessary for you to step back and have a proper view about it. Lighten up. Give yourself a break. Give me a break. It'll come to you. We'll get it done. Don't worry. So, last time I saw you guys, you were dead, and the Buddhas had appeared to you, and you were still dead. We spoke last about the section of the bardo where the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas appear. And we spoke of the 42 peaceful deities, wasn't it, and the 58 wrathful deities. Have I got the numbers right? Yes. I have a lousy memory, so I look over to these guys, and if they haven't studied, I am out of luck. So we have the 42 peaceful deities and the 58 wrathful deities. And I explained yesterday that on the appearance of the peaceful deities, one should understand, first of all, that one is unfamiliar with that. Remember, to understand, in terms of Vajrayana, to understand why we act the way we do and how we should practice, we have to understand what an important part habitual tendency takes. Remember, when the Buddhas appear to us, the peaceful Buddhas, that is, in the bardo state, they appear to us with extraordinarily brilliant lights. And I have explained to you that in that state of the bardo, those lights may even be so impactful that they will also impact the other senses, like a light so bright that you can almost hear it. If you can imagine such a thing. I've actually had an experience like that. I once had a pulse of light flash to me from one of those newfangled flashlights that have like halogen big halogen bulbs in them. I mean, you're not supposed to look at them. If you look at them, they will damage your eyes. You can't look at them. And I had a pulse of that sent at me, and it actually registered in my ears. I don't know whether scientifically it meant there was like a pulse of blood in my ears as a strong reaction or whatever. But your senses do shift like that, and particularly in the bardo, there's no clean-cut lines for your senses in the way they are now. I mean, clearly, smell goes through your nose now. Clearly, hearing goes through your ears now. Well, of course, in the bardo, although you have those same habitual tendencies, you do not have the same definite places for this information to come into. And so there is something of a bleed through. Now, when the Buddhas come to you again, that will be very unfamiliar if you have not practiced. The brilliance ever seen, and it will be somewhat terrifying if there is no preparation. It will be much more comfortable to look at the corresponding other lights that come at the same time. Such as, we talked about in the Buddha Vairocana, he appears on the first day and his light is the blue light, and it will be so brilliant it will almost hurt, that kind of thing. So brilliant, because it is not our habitual tendency to have awakened to that element of our mind, of our nature, that is in fact identical to and inseparable from that blue light nature that is Vairocana. You see. We will not have had time to do that, so we are not familiar. And it will be exactly the same phenomena that causes us not to see the black or clear path in the first part of the bardo experience. Unfamiliarity. We will, however, as I said earlier, yesterday, be familiar with the other light that shows at the same time, and that is the light of the God realm. Now, in a sense, the light of the God realm, which at that point will be a soft, welcoming, and very sweet kind of white, will be much more familiar because we will have exhibited some of the qualities that it takes to get into the God realm, that is some accumulation of merit, and we will also have accumulated some of the unfortunate problems that cause us to be born into the God realm, or the obstacles. So we have much more familiarity with them than we do with our own primordial wisdom nature. And interestingly, as the different Buddhas appear, and then as the different realms appear, you're also looking in a sense at the flip side of the same coin. Two different sides of the same coin. One is our pure nature, and the other is a display of our nature in defilement, in confusion. Of course, we will have the strong habitual tendency to go toward our nature in defilement, stronger than we will going toward the purity of our own Buddha nature, because simply we have more familiarity and more habitual tendency with our samsaric nature than we do with our awakened nature. So of course this is something that right now you are being prepared for that. When you hear something like that, you think, oh, that scares me. Of course I'm going to want to go toward a soft glowing white light, then I am going to go towards something that's almost painful, it's so bright. So I want to be really prepared for that. How can I prepare for that? And those of us that have no spaciousness in our mind and have not practiced very much and have a tendency or habitual pattern for our minds to act in a very neurotic way, will think things like, oh, I have to practice liking bright blue lights, and I have to practice not looking at soft lights and liking them anymore. And you sort of think like that, and really, that is completely unnecessary. Again, have faith in your spiritual mentor. You must know that you are already, right now, applying the antidote for whatever fear you might have had about going into bardo. Simply training in the knowledge that there is a bardo. And to the degree that when you're hearing this information, you hear it as a respectful student would hearing it from someone who has crossed the ocean of suffering, hearing it from the Buddha who has given us this information based on his many experiences of crossing the ocean of suffering himself and also helping others to cross the ocean of suffering. So, we should be, as a student, our posture would be to listen and go, yes, 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 thank you, yes. That really would be the perfect posture. Of course, our training tells us, well, we have to think things through and we have to be individuals. But that very thought will prevent you from absorbing these teachings that you will have to remember on a very deep level, a memory that is really deeper than the mind that you use to call yourself I with. It will have to go much deeper than that. And the only way it's going to go deeper than that is if the student practices devotion while hearing. Devotion is the bridge. Devotion is the method. That is why it is a useful practice that connects the student and the teacher and makes the information, in a sense, go in even more. The student who does not take advantage of their teacher's teaching simply has no devotion. It doesn't have anything to do with how good of a practitioner they are or how lazy or slothful they are. Of course, those are elements, but really it has to do with the lack of devotion. The student has not, does not have the karmic scenario to make a bridge by which the Lama can reach them and touch them. Even assume, we assume that the Lama you have chosen is qualified, and so we, you assume at that point, once you have chosen a Lama, you would have chosen them on the basis of their qualifications and on the basis of their ability to speak to you. And then once that happens, there's no more room for any doubt. Doubt is simply, you should have spent your time considering and thinking and wondering and asking yourself and looking and checking. But once you have chosen, there is no more time for the head games that you play as a student. Now you have to apply yourself, and that's the only reasonable thing to do at that point. The time for doubt is finished. The time for practice and preparation has now begun. Now that responsibility then becomes yours. The teacher can lead you, the teacher cannot force you. It is up to you to follow. So that is what has to be done. So, at any rate, you are training, you are preparing, you know what to expect. You know that you will go into a state that is unfamiliar to you, with senses that act differently than your senses act now, although they will be similar in some ways. You know that you will have many choices. You know that you will see things that are uncomfortable for you and unfamiliar. You will see things that are more familiar. You are beginning to understand that there are things that you should look for and things that you should go toward. But mostly, you have heard the most precious piece of information, and you will hear it again and again and again, and that is that these things that you have seen in the bardo, that you see in the bardo, are not to be feared. They are displays and emanations of your own mind. No matter what they look like, no matter what you see, no matter how unfamiliar you are, from the very brightest lights to the very most confused and deluding negative lights, those lights that emanate from the hell realm. These are things that are an expression of some particular aspect of your own nature, whether it is your nature in a state of defilement or the samsaric elements of your nature, or whether it is your nature in this most pure form, which is your ultimate primordial Buddha nature. Everything that you see in the bardo will be you. There is nothing to run from. It is childish and stupid to run. You cannot run away from yourself. It will pursue you. As you will see, in the bardo, there are cycles of coming back and trying to choose again, coming back and trying to choose again. You'll see that as we move on. So let's move on. Now, we have come to the part of the bardo where the peaceful Buddhas have finished appearing, and in order for you to be continuing in the bardo now, this means that the peaceful Buddhas have appeared. You have seen your nature in all of its different elements and displays. You have seen the displays of the qualities of your nature, but you did not recognize them, and you did not follow them. Fortunately, you also saw the displays that are sort of vibrational showings or displays, and also ways to enter the different 6 realms of cyclic existence. And so far, you have not entered those either. For whatever reason. And it is hard to say what the reasons are. It can be that habitually you are a person of extreme caution and are unwilling to do anything without a great deal of examining. Of course, that won't work because if you have not been trained, you are examining Bardo with the same, if not more, delusion than the delusion that you have in life when you could not examine enough to be able to get yourself out of samsara anyway. So that kind of examination will not serve you. It is this training and devotion to one's spiritual mentor that will save you. And so that is what actually works. But anyway, somehow you've managed not to go into rebirth at this time. You are still in the Bardo. Now at this time, the wrathful deities appear. When the wrathful deities appear, they do so singularly, and they do so en masse. And they appear to you in different ways, in different and it's a very dynamic kind of presentation. It is also with the peaceful Buddhas, but with the wrathful Buddhas, it is even more so. And the reason why is that the wrathful Buddhas, you've seen pictures of them. Let's see, are there any wrathful Buddhas in here? No, there aren't any in here. Well, the next time you go into the prayer room, you should look at some of the wrathful Buddhas, and you are see that they are downright spooky looking. And you ask yourself, well, what are they like, Guido and Raoul, the hitmen from New York? I mean, what is it, when the good guys can't talk you into it, the bad guys beat you into it, and you must wonder what the wrathful deities are. The wrathful deities actually are symbolic and are meant to display the aspect of enlightened compassion and method that is forceful, dominating, expanding, progressing, purifying. These are all very active words, aren't they? They're very dynamic and active words. And there are, of course, displays and expressions of one's Buddha nature that the display of which appears as absolute stillness and absolute emptiness, and a very peaceful kind of display. Of course, that is the wisdom aspect of one's own nature. But what is the method aspect of one's own nature? If wisdom and method are non-dual and completely inseparable as they are, looking at them from the purely awakened state, then it must also be just as much, if stillness is your nature, then movement is your nature. They are the same and indistinguishable. If emptiness is your nature, then fullness is your nature, because in truth, in the awakened state, emptiness and fullness cannot be distinguished. They are not only inseparable, they are not distinguishable. It is only we that separate emptiness from fullness and peacefulness from aggression or activity. So, as in the case of, let's say, Vajrakalaya, which many of you practice here, Vajrakalaya is the very wrathful display of Vajrasattva. Vajrasattva, who could be more peaceful than that deity which is meant to purify all of our samsaric afflictions, which has the capacity to purify all of our, quote, sins, all of our afflictions, all of our ego clingings, our hatred, our greed, and our ignorance. Who is more forgiving and more peaceful than that? And yet the wrathful display of Vajrasattva is Vajrakalaya. Does that mean that Vajrasattva has, let's say, PMS and a monthly basis emerges as Vajrakalaya in a real bad mood? Do you think that's what it is? No, that's not what it is. Of course it's not. It is the same nature. It is the same. Vajrakalaya is completely indistinguishable from Vajrasattva. They are the same in their function, they are the same in their capacity, they are the same in their enlightenment, but they are different in the display of method. That is all. The wrathful deities are the same pure, holy, primordial wisdom nature that is your nature. They are fully awakened. They are just as terrific as the guys that fancy in their robes. But these deities, when you see them, will look terrifying. Because what you are seeing a visual display or visual indication of the quality that they are displaying. That is the quality that they are displaying, registering in your eyes. But none other. It is your eyes that do the interpreting. Now, when we see them artfully drawn for our purposes, we see them in a way that we can interpret. We see them with skull necklaces, and we see them with diamond, with animal skins on them, and we see them with a mala or a necklace of dead skulls, and then we see some of them with necklaces of freshly severed heads. I mean, really, what an outfit. And then, really, myself, I don't mix gold and silver, and I wouldn't mix dead heads with fresh heads. Just seems inappropriate to me. But anyway, that's different. Anybody listening? Watching thunder outside, huh? So they appear to us in a form that we can understand. We are to understand, for instance, that the mala of freshly killed heads indicates the death of ego. I mean, he didn't run around and chop off heads and make a necklace. This is an indication of the death of ego. You see? So that's a functional display, is what that is. Now you will see the wrathful deities in the bardo also with a similar functional display. And it may look exactly the way the tankas look, or it may look slightly different according to your individual interpretation. But guaranteed, when you see the wrathful deities, the first tendency will be to run and be frightened. Because their activity, you're looking at the activity of the Buddhas. It's not like if we were to jump up and down in our ordinary bodies and make as much noise as we possibly could, we would still be only gathering together samsaric power. You see what I'm saying? We'd only be using what we have right now to use. And that's not even all of our brains, let alone all of our nature. We're not even awake to our nature. So we'd only be able to use this kind of power. And yet we could make a fearsome din if we really tried, couldn't we? Well, think about then the wrathful deities. They are expounding all of the forcefulness of the Buddha nature as it transforms ignorance into bliss. And it's being displayed. Well, it's going to be noisy. It's going to be really dramatic. It's going to be impressive. It's going to be colorful. And it's going to be unusual as hell. Because there is nothing usual or ordinary that we have ever seen that can, in fact, pop us from ignorance into bliss. So you must prepare yourself for the seeing of the wrathful deities. Now those of you who do, let's say, practice Vajrakalaya and have taken the time to purify your minds through the actual visualization of Vajrakalaya will then become familiar, even if you do not recognize Vajrakalaya per se, which may happen, because in the bardo state, one of the things that you're fighting is the same thing that you're fighting when you're sleepy in practice. And to the degree that you are able to overcome sleepiness in practice and while you are receiving teachings, to that degree, you will have clarity in the bardo. Doesn't that scare you? To the degree that you have the dullness and the lethargy and the inability to stay awake during class and the inability to stay awake during practice, you have in the bardo a funny kind of, you know how it is when you're either practicing or just waking up during a practice? When you try to remember what the visualization is in your mind, kind of slides off of it. Do you know what I'm talking about? You sort of get the visualization and suddenly it's almost like you fell off, or it's slippery almost. You can hardly, and you find yourself someplace else. Well, you're kind of half in and out of the bardo of dreaming there, believe it or not too well in the bardo of concentration or meditation. You're kind of half in the bardo of dreaming, and the mind has this slip-slidey kind of funniness, that like jelly-like quality that it sort of runs everywhere. Well, it's the same thing in the bardo. So that you may look at Vajrasattva, and if your practice has not been that good, you may not actually truly recognize Vajrasattva and what that is. But you may be able to center on one small object, like let's say the porba that Vajrakalaya, I meant to say Vajrakalaya, that Vajrakalaya holds. That may key you, and you may just recognize the hand implement. And all you have to do is take refuge in the hand implement, and that is the first step, and it will lead to liberation in the bardo. Recognizing the meaning of the hand implement, thinking to yourself, that is the very porba that will pierce the ignorance of my mind. I see that. I want that. And then the devotion comes up like, that is the porba that will pierce the veil. And you look at that porba, and with the force of your own, inner awareness that you still have in the bardo state, you will go toward that porba, and that is liberation through recognition. So that is the kind of thing that happens with the blessing of generation stage practice. But remember, you have to be prepared and forewarned for the movement, dynamism, the dramatic display of the wrathful deities. They are the force and activity of the Buddhas. What do you think that's going to look like? That's a big deal. That's a big deal. That is equal to the force that it takes to liberate all sentient beings. It's got to be more forceful than Hiroshima. Any bomb that we've ever seen, the biggest bombs that we can imagine, it must be more forceful than that. Therefore, prepare yourself to recognize the blessing of the wrathful energy of the Buddhas. This is not separate from you. When you see the Buddhas in their wrathful state, do you really think that it is separate from you, that it is unfamiliar to you, that you yourself are not like that and should run? In fact, this is an indication to you and a display of your own nature. When you become a Buddha, and intrinsic within your Buddha nature is the capacity to liberate sentient beings in a forceful and active way. This is the aspect of your nature that you will come to rely on. When you have completed giving rise to the bodhicitta, and your only hope is to be able to liberate sentient beings from suffering, you will look to that part of you, that element of your nature that is forceful and dramatic and able to dominate samsara, to suppress samsara through a wrathful display. Again, we can't have the superficial view. We don't understand wrathful display. Wrathful display, to see a wrathful display to us might be having a temper. But you must understand that we are talking about force and power, the enlightened force and power and potential necessary to liberate beings. Particularly during this age, which is the age of Kali Yuga, the age of decay and degeneration, at this time the wrathful beings are even more powerful, even more forceful, because their display is more in line with this time. It is more necessary. This being the time of degeneration, wrathful force is needed. And so in the bardo, we should not only not be afraid of the wrathful, but we should look to them, look for them at them, and rely on them with confidence, because it may be them that is able to break through our own ignorance. This is the aspect of our own nature. Again, it is not external, but we have to talk in that way. We say we look to them to be able to break through our ignorance. Excuse me. And yet, in fact, we are relying on that aspect of our own Buddha nature to stamp out the hatred, greed, and ignorance within our own minds, and the degree to which the hatred, greed, and ignorance are ripening. These things are what we rely on the wrathful deities for, and so they are precious to us. And even though many of us like the pictures of the peaceful deities, we like to practice the peaceful deities, we just think they're friendlier. We just like them better. Prettier, better outfits, just friendlier. It is in fact the wrathful deities upon which we should rely ultimately. We will need them at some point. There is not one of us that will not rely on that very power, that very display, at some point in our spiritual development, to crush the ego, to pierce the veil of delusion, to to rip apart the thick covering of grasping and desire that covers us and keeps our eyes closed to our inner awareness, to the awareness of our nature. Guaranteed there is some point in your development, whether it is during the course of your life where you will have to practice some wrathful deity in order to remove obstacles, or whether in the course of your going through the bardo, it is that very force, that very energy on which you will rely to move you into enlightenment. And that very energy can also be seen sometimes in the guise of our teachers. Sometimes our teachers, in order to break through limitations that happen within our mind, will be very firm with us, very stern with us, very, very forceful. I've had that happen to me. I know His Holiness Pen Rinpoche, when he came here to give the Rinchen Terzat, he saw an obstacle to my life. And there are many reasons for that, and one of them is that I am teaching Dharma from my own habit of practicing Dharma life after life. There's very little actual academic training that I have had in this lifetime. And so there are obstacles that come with that. And so these obstacles must be purified, and they are purified through continuing to gather the merit of teaching students, as I am doing, through fulfilling the instructions of my teachers, which is to continue teaching as I am doing. And in that way the obstacles are overcome. But then in another way, I rely on my spiritual mentor, just as you rely on your spiritual mentor, and he relies on his spiritual mentor. That's the nature. That is how we look to our own innate nature. That is how we do it when we are physical. We look to our spiritual mentor. So he came and gave a very wrathful display. He was extremely wrathful, and it would seem, from an ordinary sense of view, unjustly so. My Lama actually accused me of something that both he and I knew I would never do. And he knew that I did not do it, and I did not do it. And other people came and said, but Rinpoche, she would never do that. She never did that. And there was no proof that it was done. There was no one that told him it had to be done. He just picked it up somewhere. He manufactured it. He just pulled it out. So he threw this at me, and all I could do as a good student was to just go like that and take it and try to understand how I could improve myself. And there was no way to defend myself because there was nothing to defend myself against. And so then when he was finished, his wrathful display finished, and I of course was shaken and changed and crying and needing my spiritual mentor, his love and his guidance and his help. And at that point he saw that he was finished and that the job was done, and he reached over and he touched my face and he said, now Ahkon Lhamo, that's over with. Now don't get mad. And I was like, mad? I'm just trying to survive this moment. We're not mad. We're trying to live through this. And so I didn't get mad, and he said that because I didn't get mad or have any judgment or anything like that, and because I understood what he was trying to do, then those obstacles to my life could be raised. And I remember that after he did that, I felt 10 or 20 years younger. I felt wonderful, really good, after I understood what had happened. And so that is the kind of activity that we may even see on a physical level. That is the wrathful activity of a Buddha. It is necessary to be seen in that way, because the obstacles that it is meant to crush are also violent and dramatic and forceful. The force of our own karma is violent, dramatic, and forceful. And so we, in order to be skillful, we have to use that which is equal in strength and superior in strength to all the forces of samsara. And so that is the nature of that kind of wrath. Therefore, you should not be afraid. And train yourself then to recognize the images of the wrathful deities, to recognize their nobility, their purpose, their generosity, their kindness, the love that emanates from them. Should we pass through the bardo where we meet the wrathful deities, and still we have not been liberated, we have not exited, then we will continue on in the bardo. Now, One thing that is interesting about the bardo, and this is a very interesting thing I want to tie to get together with all of you at this time. You may have noticed that in practicing Vajrayana, there are certain patterns that appear again and again and again. And those patterns are that in generation stage teaching, we, again, as I explained to you yesterday, we have the seeing of oneself as the way we see ourselves now, but seeing it lightly and in an illusory way. We sort of lighten up on the way that we see ourselves, and we do that by dissolving self-nature into shunyata and meditating temporarily, realizing that self-nature and emptiness are indistinguishable from one another. We practice meditating on emptiness. This is before we accomplish generation stage practice. And then there is the reemergence or the reappearance, birth. The disillusion into emptiness is the disappearance or death, the ordinary death, the disappearance of the physical self when you're beginning to practice generation stage teachings. That is the same as, and fits in with the pattern of death. You see what I'm saying? That is ordinary death. The meditation on emptiness is the realization or the dissolving of all of the elements, and the meditation on the black or clear path, or the appearance of the primordial wisdom nature as happens in the bardo. That is in generation stage practice, practiced by the meditation on shunyata. Then the reappearance, which is the reappearance as self-nature reappears as the deity, often reappearing as the seed syllable first, and then reappearing as the deity itself. That is rebirth. Literally, when we are practicing generation stage teaching, we are practicing how to die and be reborn. How to die as ordinary and be reborn as supreme or extraordinary or enlightened, as the miraculous rebirth. This is what we are practicing, and that is the logic of Vajrayana practice and of generation stage teaching, so that every time you practice generation stage teaching, you are practicing for the bardo. And every time you practice for the bardo, you are practicing generation stage teaching. And every time that you engage in a clear visualization of rebirth in generation stage teaching, which is generally, it depends on the practice. You have to learn how the practice is meant to go. But many times there is first the reappearance of the seed syllable, or sometimes the seed syllable, which is indicative or is a display of the wisdom nature of the deity. You see the seed syllable emerge, and oftentimes the seed syllable will either emerge first, or it will emerge seated on a lotus throne, seated on a throne that is described. The lotus throne, that's always an important part of the generation of oneself as the deity. And that either transforms or becomes the heart of the deity itself. Generally, it transforms into the deity itself. And the deity itself is seen to be on a lotus throne. Now, what we are practicing there is for death and rebirth. Literally, in our lifetimes, we die ignorant, we remain in the bardo ignorant, and we take rebirth unawares, without any choosing, simply through the force of the winds of karma or through escape of the fear of bardo. This is how we take rebirth. You can also be reborn in an egg, and you can be reborn to a parent. And those are some of the ways that one can appear, one can be reborn. You can also be reborn in your practice, which is also a miraculous birth, an instantaneous rebirth. And that is within the practice, that is within the bardo of meditation. One can achieve that same image or pattern of death and rebirth. So these are the ways in which one achieves rebirth. But since we have died ignorantly, have gone through the bardo in an ignorant way, then of course we achieve rebirth in an ignorant way. And we cannot see. When we come to see our parents, for instance, we see our parents in a lustful and desirous way. Actually, it's kind of weird the way we find our parents. And I'll explain to you the bardo of becoming. This is the end result and the final thing before, when the winds of karma are forcing us, they blow us in certain directions, and we find people with whom we have certain kinds of karmic connections, and we go toward them, and because we have karma with them, we think that we know them and we recognize them, and they're familiar to us, and we want them. We want them. And we want them because desire is the habitual tendency that keeps us revolving in death and rebirth. That is our strongest habit, the habit of desire and wanting. When we see our parents, we actually are attracted in some ways by their smell. That is kind of interesting. We find them, one of the ways that we find them is through smell. It's different a little bit than the way we smell in our noses now. Our noses, of course, we don't have noses then, but it is a sense like smell. It is a perception that is like smell, and it has to do with desire. And actually, this is going to gross some of you out, I know. Certainly it grosses me out when I think about it. But we actually feel desire for our parents. When we see them, generally we see them in the act of coupling, or we see them immediately after that, and we are drawn because of the possibility of conception. We are drawn because there is this we can sense or smell or vibe with the presence of the male seed and the female seed and their close proximity. And we actually feel desire. It is the only way we are ignorant. We are in an ignorant mind state, and we are continuing on in ignorance. And so what is being expressed is ignorance. And so desire is at the top there. And if we are women, we actually move away from the mother and try to go toward the father. If we are identifying as females, and we're starting to identify as females, we are going toward the father, and that both tends to create or tip us in a certain direction as to what gender we're going to be, and it draws out certain elements in us. But anyway, we'll go towards the father and identify more closely with his seed. If, on the other hand, we are male, we will go toward the mother and move away from the father and identify more closely with her egg. And so there is a desire element that begins to happen, and at some point the being is actually trapped between that, enmeshed in a scenario that begins and continues and expresses simply desire. And it is desire that causes us to be reborn at that time. Now, when we practice generation stage teachings, what are we practicing? We're practicing perfect rebirth, enlightened rebirth. We are practicing letting go of our strong, clinging ideas to ego. We meditate on shunyata, realizing that the empty primordial wisdom nature is inseparable from that which is our display. And then we give rise to ourselves as the deity. Now, if we give rise to ourselves as the deity, that is coming from a place of enlightened awareness, even though we ourselves are not enlightened. We're practicing enlightened practice. So we give rise to ourselves as the deity, and we visualize that we are born on a lotus. That's why the deity is seated on a lotus. What we are doing there is we are purifying our next rebirth. Our next rebirth, our previous rebirth, since we were born as humans filled with desire, was not so auspicious. We saw our parents, we were running with fear, we had not recognized our mind, we're in a state of confusion. Then on top of it, we feel lust and desire for our parents. We get stuck in the middle of that whole scenario. Lust and desire is the seed of our very lives. And of course, then our experience was that when we were born in pain. We were not perceiving ourselves to be born in a lotus. We perceived the very lotus of our birth, which, if we had awakened or could be awakened or could taste the awakened nature, we would see that is not the case. But the lotus of our birth, which we should have perceived as pure, as without defilement, because it is the seat of our birth. And if we were awake, we would have known that. But instead, what did we perceive ourselves coming out of? An ordinary physical body. The birth is painful, it is traumatic, it is messy. I mean, you can call it beautiful if you want to, if you're some kind of nature lover, but it ain't pretty. I mean, horse manure is natural too, but I'm not going to brush my teeth with it. How did we perceive ourselves? It's because we do not understand our nature. We had an ordinary birth, ordinary childhood, ordinary experiences, and here we are ordinary. So now we are practicing for miraculous rebirth. In generation stage practice, we practice the pure view of seeing our birth, since we are enlightened, since we achieve the miraculous rebirth in our practice, and we give rise to the miraculous birth with the compassionate and pure intention, we are then practicing the view of being reborn on a lotus. Now, if we could practice that well enough to recognize our nature within the bardo, literally one is reborn on a lotus. In Dewa Chen, in the Pure Lands, one is literally reborn on a lotus. That is the experience. It is a miraculous rebirth. One is born aware of one's condition, with a stronger awareness and with a continuation of, and it said in Dewa Chen, you are not only born aware, but you are also born practicing the path. Of course, with pure view, we understand that the seed of Buddhahood, the path of Buddhahood, and the result of Buddhahood, while they seem to be three different things, are indistinguishable. So in the mind of enlightenment, that would make sense. To us, it doesn't make sense. But we are grappling here with the difference between ignorant awareness and enlightened awareness. Within the bardo of becoming, since we have not recognized our nature, we will surely take rebirth in the 6 realms of cyclic existence. However, we can do much at this time to determine the extent of our next rebirth.
So thank you very much. We are so happy that you have joined us for this teaching, and we hope you'll come back for the rest of the series. This is going to be on the next couple of Wednesdays. This is 5, 6, 7, 3 more. There's 8 in the series, and they will be on Wednesday evenings at 7:30 p.m. And in addition, we do have Jetsunma's teachings on Sundays at 11 a.m. It's not part of this series, but they are, teachings that she gave, in the past, and we run them, for you to enjoy as much as we do, I think, really. So we're happy that you do. I put in the chat, if you want to make an offering to Jetsunma on receiving a teaching, you can do so on her PayPal address, which is jetsumagift@gmail.com. And in addition, if you're in the area, we invite you to come to KPC. The outside is always open from dawn to dusk, and there's just lots to do in the outside. We hope soon the inside will be open and be safe for you. So stay in touch. Check out our website, tara.org, and you should get word there, or subscribe to our newsletter, and you can do that. I believe you can sign up on our website as well. We are having a practice retreat this weekend on Saturday, and that will be various sessions of practicing the Vajra Guru mantra, Guru Rinpoche. We're doing this for basically the alleviation of all the obstacles that are here in the world today, but specifically prompted by Ukraine at the moment and the situation there, so that we can make prayers for everyone involved. You can join us if you like. The information is up on our website, tara.org is the website. And if you go to across the top, if you go to events, you'll find it. You'll find a calendar. And once you find the calendar, you just click on the event, and it'll tell you, where to find it online how to join if you wish. It's a practice event. We will be using the Riggs and Dupa practice, and we will, be chanting the mantra within that practice. So it's basically just practicing in that way, in the Vajrayana way. So if you join us, there will be a link to the practice. In any case, please come and join us as often as you can, online or in person, and we can't wait to see you next time. Stay safe and have a good week.